Welcome back, guys. So today I want to talk about the top of the line Super Nintendo flash card, the SD2SNES. This thing gets better and better as time goes on. It's awesome. Just the amount of special chips and games that are compatible on this just blows the competition out the water. This is the best of the best, and it's just constantly getting better. So just a couple months ago, we talked about Red Guy's implementation of the Super FX chip into the SD2SNES, and now it is actually part of the official firmware. Flippin' amazing. So when I reported on that and I kind of showed it a little bit, I don't like using non-official firmware, so I converted mine right back to official firmware and just said, you know what, I don't care about FX, I'm gonna wait until it is officially implemented into the firmware. Not that there was any issues with it, but I just like, those official chains of command with the firmware, not having to mess around with anything. So I waited, and now we have it. Pretty awesome stuff. So today I'm going to show you real quick how to implement that into your SD2SNES and show a little gameplay footage. So there's a lot of awesome Super FX games that can be played on this now. You got Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, Star Fox 2, Doom, Stunt Race FX, and a handful of other awesome games. But the other thing that is pretty sweet is the same guy who made this firmware for the FX, or did the implementation of the Super FX chip for the SD2SNES, he is also working on SA-1 support. That's a game changer right there for a lot of people. To me, there's not necessarily a ton of awesome SA-1 games, but for plenty of other people there is. But just some of the highlights, you got Kirby's Dream Land 3, the other Kirby game, can't remember what the heck it's called right now, but the two Kirby games for the Super Nintendo, but the big one is Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. That is the one that people really want to be able to play on this. It's not necessarily an expensive game. It's getting up there in price a little bit. I think it's probably between the $50 to $70 range depending upon condition. So that's one that a lot of people want support for on this, and that will be coming pretty soon, and that's going to be awesome for sure. This is the best flash cart out there, no arguing that. It is pretty pricey though. A lot of people are put off by the price of this thing, but once you consider some of the special chip games that can play, like the CX4 stuff with Mega Man X2 and 3, you get your money's worth out of it if you're into playing on legitimate hardware, or even high-end clone hardware like the Super NT. I think that's pretty amazing stuff. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump up into this, show you how to install the firmware, the new official firmware, and take a look at some gameplay. So let's do it. Okay guys, so in order to get this new firmware, version 1.8.0, onto our SD2SNES, you're going to navigate to the project page, the official page. I'll have a link in the description so you could peep it out and find it easy. But once you get to the blog post here, it does explain some of the changes and implementations for this newest firmware. We're not going to go over all that today because the biggest thing that we're interested in is the Super FX support being added to it. But you can go ahead and read some of this. It explains, some of the stuff that's going on here. Once you're ready to download the firmware, go ahead and go to either the downloads page up here or just click downloads on the blog post. And as you can see here, the latest version 1.8 you can download. The source and changelog are not available yet. That's kind of unfortunate. I'm curious to read what other changes have been made. Hopefully that'll be up, like they say, pretty soon here. But all you're going to need to do is go ahead and download this. Once you have it downloaded, it will be a zip file. So I've already thrown that onto my SD card. You don't have to put the zip file on your SD card, but I'm just doing it just for the sake of the ease of showing how this is done. So let's go ahead and go to the SD card. Now on our SD card, you're going to have the SD2SNES folder. That's where typically your firmware will be. It is advised usually to delete the firmware once you have updated, but if you leave it on there by accident, typically nothing bad happens. What we want to do is go ahead and extract this compressed folder with the new firmware, and what it's going to do is give you a new SD2SNES folder. But I don't want that to replace my folder, so I'm just going to go ahead and extract it to its own folder for the time being. And go ahead and delete the zip, so I don't need that anymore. And then in the actual firmware folder, like I said, we do have the new SD2SNES folder. You could just let that copy over if you like. Me personally, I just like taking the actual contents, copying them, and putting them actually in here and letting it overwrite anything that it needs to. Just, you know, that's just the way I do it. You can just copy the full folder over. But once you have that done, you have this firmware on your SD2SNES folder. You're pretty much ready to go. You do need to make sure you have these FPGA you know, files here. The GSU is for the Super FX. But once you have all this done, you are ready to pop that SD card out, put it in your SD2SNES, and boot up your system. It'll take a moment. It'll install that new firmware. And like I said, you can go back and delete the firmware just in case. I typically don't, but some people do advise you do that. So let's go ahead and update the firmware and peep out some gameplay. Let's do it. Alright guys, so we have the new firmware on our SD card popped into the SD2SNES. I am running this on my analog Super NT, one of the best ways to play Super Nintendo. Definitely highly recommended. Love this system. I do have official hardware as well, but I do like using the Super NT for recording purposes. Just makes life a little bit easier. So once the game, or the cartridge, the SD2SNES has booted up, the firmware will be installed. We can double check that by pressing X and go in the system info, and boom, there we go. Firmware version 1.8.0. So we are on the official newest firmware. So here I am using the Smoke Monster pack for the SD2SNES. And typically you would go to special chip games and you would have DSP games and then the SD2SNES only games, which are going to be like the CX4 stuff with Mega Man X2 and 3, and then you had, you know, Star Ocean in there as well. But what we want to do if we're using this pack is go to unsupported chip games, because that is where our FX games would be. So if you're using an older version of this pack, then, you know, you're probably going to want to situate this a little differently and get those you know, FX games out of the unsupported pack. But we're going to go ahead and go in there, and here we go. We have, you know, a handful of Super FX games, plus, you know, some of the SA-1 games that are not currently working, but that prospect of SA-1, you know, being implemented is pretty sweet. Oh, that's what it was, Kirby Superstar. So those two Kirby games are unsupported, but eventually they will be, and I think that is flippin' awesome. So we have a few games we can take a look at. Doom, let's go ahead and load that up. Pretty much instant on the SD2SNES. I love it. It's such a quick loading flash cart here. And as we see, nothing special. The game boots right up. Not necessarily the best port of Doom, but I did play this quite a bit back in the day on the Super Nintendo. I think it's pretty sweet that we can, you know, play it now on the SD2SNES. You know, a lot of people like using this flash cart who, you know, either are collectors or don't really care for the collecting aspect of retro games. They just want to be able to play on, you know, either official hardware or, you know, high-end clone hardware, or, you know, even middle ground clone hardware, whatever you want to consider it all. And the SD2SNES really, you know, it's expensive, almost a couple $100 for this device. But with all the support you get and the games you can play, especially now with the Super FX being officially implemented, it really is of good value in my opinion. A little pricey to jump into to begin with, but for those who don't really care about collecting, or they just want to test games out, it's definitely a device that's worth the price of admission. You know, I was kind of hesitant on the flash cart thing, you know, previously, and I wound up jumping into all of it. You know, pretty much every system that has a flash cart available that I own, I have the flash cart for, just because it's so much more convenient testing games, playing ROM hacks and homebrews, and having, you know, pretty much the access to the entire system's library on these things. And with the SD2SNES, we're getting a lot closer to the complete library worldwide for the Super Nintendo, so I think that's pretty cool. So the other thing, you know, now you can play, you know, Star Fox 2. I'm not going to boot it up because it takes forever to get into the game, but I've already tested it and it works, you know. So you can play the Super Nintendo Classic version on here, which is the newest release, the full-on version instead of the prototype. You also have Stunt Race FX. You know, that's one some people like. I don't really, you know, think it's that great of a game, but it was still pretty neat. Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island, you have access to now. So that is definitely awesome. And, you know, with all these little things coming up, getting FX officially implemented into this, and then the prospect of SA-1 coming soon, hopefully anyway, I think that's really cool. So, you know, having access to those Kirby games, Super Mario RPG, this is really going to be an awesome device, which it already is, but it's just going to be even more awesome once we get that SA-1 implementation. But I just want to do this video, showcase this to you guys, that Super FX is now officially implemented into the, you know, the official firmware, so you don't have to go about any kind of roundabout ways or using unofficial firmware to implement that, which there was really no issue using Red Guy's firmware, but it is cool that, you know, they partnered up and got everything implemented officially so everybody can easily have access to this stuff. Definitely really cool, man. So I just wanted to let you guys know about this. Links will be in the description. You can peep that all out. Thanks for checking in, watching this video. Smash that like button if you could. Really do appreciate it. Subscribe if you have not done so already. We got a lot of cool projects and videos coming up. Can't wait to share with you guys. So with that said, thank you, and I will catch y'all next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.